Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. I've lived on my family's farm for as long as I can remember. My grandparents started it years ago, and my parents took it over when they got married. Now it's my turn to work the land, just like generations before me. This place means everything to me. It's where I learned to walk, went on my first horseback ride, got my heart broken for the first time. Every inch of this property holds a memory, which is why I got so angry when Karen moved in next door and decided she could just take over part of my land. Karen bought the plot next to ours a few months back. I went over to welcome her to the neighborhood when I saw the moving trucks roll in. She was polite at first, but got a sour look on her face when I mentioned being her neighbor. I didn't think much of it at the time. Figured she was just stressed from the move. Oh, how wrong I was. Not 2 weeks after Karen moved in, I caught her putting up a fence on my property. And not just a few feet over the line either. She was encroaching a good acre or two into my fields. I marched right over and asked her just what in tarnation she thought she was doing. Karen glared at me and said this was her land now. She'd paid for it fair and square. I informed her that she was mistaken. This was my family's property, and had been for generations. Karen got red in the face and started screaming at me to get off her land. Said she'd called the county office and had the property lines changed. I told her that wasn't possible without my consent. She didn't take too kindly to that, started ranting about how I was just an idiot bumpkin who didn't know a property deed from a cow pie. Charming woman. I stood my ground and said she had till the end of the week to take her fence down and get back on her own land. Karen said if I set foot on her property again, she'd have me arrested for trespassing. Then she stormed off muttering what a moron I was. Real piece of work, that one. Well, I wasn't about to let Karen bully me on my own family's land. First thing next morning, I drove down to the county office to sort this mess out. Sure enough, the records showed our property lines hadn't changed one bit. Karen was just trying to snatch land that wasn't hers. Armed with the official records, I marched back over to Karen's place, ready to set things straight. She must have been watching for me because she burst out the front door yelling that I was trespassing and she was calling the police. I told her to go right ahead. The cops would surely be interested in the fraudulent land claim she was trying to make. Karen grabbed her cell phone and dialed cop, all while screaming at me to get off her property. I just shook my head. This lady had a screw loose for sure. It wasn't long before the cops showed up. I explained the situation calmly, showing them the county records that proved the boundary lines. The officers tried talking to Karen, but she kept insisting this was all a plot against her, claimed we doctored the records to steal land from her. Yeah, right. Finally, the cops had enough of Karen's ravings and arrested her for filing a false report. She kicked and screamed about suing us all the way into the back of the patrol car. What a spectacle. I thought that would be the end of it, but Karen wasn't done yet. A week later, I came back from running errands to find a moving truck at my place. Workers were carrying boxes out of my house. I ran over shouting for them to stop. The foreman looked confused and said they'd been hired to clear out the property by the owner. I informed him quite forcefully that I was the owner. About that time, Karen came marching up, waving a stack of papers. She smugly told the movers I was just a disturbed man who couldn't accept she'd bought my family's farm out from under me. Said she had every right to move into her house and get rid of my junk. She'd even forged eviction notices to make her scheme look legit. The audacity of this woman was mind-boggling. Thankfully, the movers could tell something fishy was going on, and they stopped what they were doing. I called the cops again while Karen screamed obscenities at me and the workers. Really not a stable human being. This time, the police arrested Karen on the spot. Turns out she'd pulled some strings and gotten someone at the county office to temporarily change the ownership records, a buddy she'd paid off. But the truth came out eventually. Karen ended up doing jail time for fraud and forgery. The judge also slapped her with a restraining order, so she can never set foot on my farm again. Good riddance, I say. She tried claiming it was all just a misunderstanding caused by a filing error, but the evidence showed what she really was, a lying, scheming thief. I'm just glad I caught her before she succeeded in stealing my ancestral home right out from under me. Goes to show you can't trust everyone who smiles to your face and says hi when they move into the neighborhood. Some people will pretend to be sweet as pie while they plot to rob you blind. Karen was one of those, but in the end her deceitful ways got her a jail cell instead of my property. This whole ordeal just made me appreciate my home and my roots even more. The land provides, just like my grandparents taught me. As long as I work hard and keep the faith like generations before, this farm will sustain me, no matter what any greedy, scheming Karens try to pull. I won't let anyone steal what's rightfully mine, my home, my livelihood, and my family's legacy. The next one is a pro-revenge story. This one might be petty, and definitely not as epic as some of the posts I've seen here, and I'm long-winded. Relevant background info first. Anyway, several years ago, I was working at one of the big hardware stores in my area. It's a household name and had some upward mobility with decent pay for the area. I never really found a niche there after my first year and a half. I learned quickly, though, so they kind of made me a Swiss Army employee. I could work hardware, plumbing, mix paint, make keys, prepare contracts for installs, and knew all the features and flaws of the appliance models we sold. I was happy to do this because I was building a reputation as someone who could do everything. 2 years in, a new program was implemented that I was uniquely qualified to assist with. They created a new position for me. It was marketed as an all-in-one renovation remodel service for interiors. I was to assist the designer with product selection, product information, contracts, and local marketing for this service. Everyone involved was super excited about it. Note, I was still only making $10 an hour in 2015 for this. The problem was that because this was brand new, no one knew how it should work. The designer basically had to figure it out for herself, while I tried to catch her up with all of the store and product knowledge I had accumulated during my unique experience with the company. Issues with the program? It was way too expensive. Product to be used had to come from one of our stores, which was limiting. No one knew about it. It was a rocky start. Coworkers would call me over to talk to customers if they mentioned working on a big project, but that's all we had. No completed jobs to reference or anything provided by corporate to get us running. We made our own stuff. I put together a video advertising the service and got the nod from management to use the company card to purchase a TV and media player to roll the video on repeat. We built vignettes in the store to showcase our design ability. I had been picking up a lot from the designer, so it ended up being a partnership in effect. The micromanager, enter Devin, the assistant manager. He had actually been involved in the project from the beginning and had been pretty supportive and brought good energy at first. But I think he got fed up with issues that we couldn't control. Sloppy contractors refusing to fix things that they messed up. Slow design process as customers worked out what they wanted, and people just backing out after taking a bunch of our time when they see the price. We were, on average, charging $3,000 more for a small bathroom remodel on labor alone. Consulting and design fees were also worked into the final cost. The product was discounted to basically being tax-free, but as I mentioned, options were limited to products the company sold. It was just too expensive to make many sales on the poorer side of town, where almost everyone knows some kind of contractor or tradesman with connections. It wasn't a good market for this program, but we did manage to start hitting and exceeding our numbers. Number 7 in the region for the brand new program was not bad. And just when we finally started getting some business and a rhythm around 8 months in, Devin decided that it was not working fast enough for him. Obviously, the designer was to blame since he had no authority over the contractors or setting prices. She didn't know what she was doing, and he was going to make some changes. He honestly didn't do much besides hover, bring bad energy, and make terrible suggestions. He didn't understand the scope of what we had to do to get a customer out the door and happy. He forced us to cut corners and get the sale as quickly as possible without concern for liability, for basically destroying a room in someone's home to remake it, or what was realistic in terms of timelines. Customers felt rushed and got nervous. They backed out. We came to a standstill. We would only have 2 or 3 designs in progress at a time, but suddenly, after working our asses off building the program, we had no customers for the first time in 6 months. Obviously, Devin was not subjecting us to his authority hard enough, so he went harder and fired the designer. I lost my patience, justice, or injustice IDK. I'm a chill dude, but I had been working my ass off for this company, making peanuts on the promise that I was working towards something. I endured working for the incompetent managers that got their positions because they started working there at 18 and made it their life. The toxic alpha male, I will lead, you will follow, BS was too much, so I started bullying him back. making fun of him in a teasing way where he couldn't really react without looking bad or losing control. I did that for a while, and he left me alone to run the program in the interim since I was the only option. The designer and I had become friends, though, so I was still mad about how it went down. I wasn't finished yet, but I didn't know what to do. Eventually, they got another designer, and Devin had me moved back to what I had been doing before, passed over for several promotions that I was more than qualified for. The market had been flooded with long-time employees that were being moved around. Bad luck, but I was done with the place. One day we were sent an email link to an anonymous manager review survey. The store computers were set up with an always-on and logged-in user profile, so I wrote down the link and verified with a coworker that they weren't unique. In every department I visited that day, I wrote a review for Devin, all different ratings, some good, some bad, but I made the good ones sound bad, as if I didn't know it was bad. I did that maybe 10 times. It wasn't character assassination or anything, just opinion-based stuff with some vague examples so no one could figure out it was me. I didn't lie either. I just said what people don't usually say out loud. He would barely look at anyone after that. A couple of weeks later, he resigned his position as assistant manager and took an exterior design position at the other end of the store, as far away from the departments he had been over before. Basically the same thing as what we had done with interiors, but he was in the designer's shoes. I left a couple of months later to work tech support for DHS, but while I was still in training for that, my friends from the store told me he had gotten fired. Maybe he learned something? He should at least have learned how my designer friend felt. They were both fired at Christmas. The next one is a petty revenge story. One of the managers at work was going through some pretty horrific medical issues. He was well-liked, so a collection was pretty inevitable. Of all the staff who knew him well, I was the only one organized enough to get it done, so it fell on me. While he was off sick, I sent out an email, put a note on the board, and explained in the next big meeting that I would be collecting and why. I made it clear that his birthday was a little over a month away, and it would be a good idea to time it for that. Everyone seemed keen, and I received a lot of donations straight away. I made sure to record everyone's name who donated so that I could get them to sign the card later on. One of my coworkers, Linda, made a bit of a show of saying that she would contribute later when she had the cash available. It was a little odd. Plenty of people don't carry cash, and she didn't need to make a big deal out of it. These types of things never involve huge amounts of money, and she certainly had plenty of it. But if she didn't want to contribute, I wasn't going to force her. A few weeks before I needed to buy the gift, I sent out an email to everyone so that they could contribute if they wanted to, and again a week before. In the next meeting, I let everyone know that I would be buying a gift that weekend and would send out a couple of options later that day. Everyone who contributed could vote. Of all people, Linda starts telling the room what to buy, despite not contributing any money yet and making some pretty unsuitable suggestions. I reluctantly agree to put it on the list of choices and send it out to everyone who has donated. I buy the gift and a card and pass it around with the list of names. Someone is holding on to it, so I track it down to get it moving again. I happen to see that Linda has added not only her name but also a message that takes up a lot of space. So I did something very petty. I went and bought a new card, got everyone apart from Linda to resign, and took it around to everyone else without her knowing. We ended up presenting the gift in a big meeting on his first full day back. He opened the card in front of everyone. I wish I could have seen her face when she realized it wasn't the one she signed. I'm told she was planning to raise an official complaint, but was told not to be an idiot. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Several years ago, I worked for the worst boss ever. I was working as a teacher at a preschool. I had 28 students in my class, aged 4, 5. I had no assistant at any time of the day, so this meant I had to do quite a lot of tasks all at once by myself. One of these tasks was bathroom breaks. The bathroom had a half wall with boys on one side and girls on the other. This way, the teacher could supervise all the learners at once. I had a very well-oiled routine with my class during bathroom breaks. Let me explain it in detail here. If you don't want to read, you can skip to the next paragraph. I had 2 lines, one for boys and one for girls. They lined up on opposite sides so that they couldn't see into the other toilet. Kids went in groups of 4 at a time. Once they were done, they sat on the floor in the doorway until everyone finished. This way, I could keep my eyes on almost every child at all times. The doors were always open, so I could run out if needed, and I jumped over the half wall when necessary. Basically, I had everyone within a few meters of myself. This entire routine took about 10 minutes. I followed this routine once every hour. Kids could go to the bathroom by themselves between bathroom breaks, and there were no issues. One day, my boss came shouting into my class. A girl in my class had an accident and wet herself while on her way to the bathroom. My boss shouted about this girl wetting her pants in front of all my students who were having free play. The kids were all silent. She screamed at me, and I tried to explain that the girl didn't make it to the bathroom, but our next bathroom break was in 10 minutes. She continued shouting at me. I waited for her to finish screaming and asked if the child who wet herself had been helped to change. She said no, and that I had to go do it. I couldn't leave my learners unsupervised, so I asked if she could please keep an eye on my class while I changed the student into dry clothes. She looked me in the eye and said, "No, your whole class is having a bathroom break now, and from now on, you go every 20 minutes. Bathroom break, the whole class, every 20 minutes. I just nodded my head and told my learners it was pack-up time. She said to leave the class as it was and go to the bathroom. The kids lined up at the class door, and then we walked outside a few meters to the lockers. We lined up again while I collected new clothes. Then we walked to the bathroom and followed the routine as mentioned earlier, but I also had to change my student into dry clothes. It was a nightmare. I checked the clock when we left and made a mental note to come back in 20 minutes. And I did every 20 minutes. The problem was that the bathrooms were cleaned every 30 minutes, so often we had to wait outside because the bathroom was wet. Other classes needed to use the toilet, but we were constantly in there. We walked to the toilet and returned if no one said they needed to use it. By the end of the day, they were so sick of going to the toilet, around 1 p.m. The next morning, we continued the routine. Sometimes parents came to drop off their children, and there was no one to welcome them or watch their child. Or parents were still trying to do a handover, and then it was time for the bathroom break. We started our morning circle, went to the bathroom, read a story, and went to the bathroom again. Every 20 minutes. Everyone in that school was so annoyed with me. Everyone knew it was ridiculous, but I told them, "That's what boss lady said." That afternoon, a schedule was sent out indicating when every class could use the bathroom, scheduling the bathroom breaks and cleaning breaks for all the classes. And wouldn't you know it, my class was scheduled for a bathroom break once every 60 minutes. The next one is an entitled People story. I overheard a Karen while I was in self-checkout. She was already at the register, and the only register open was next to her. I had to park my cart farther away than I wanted to because she had at least 6 kids under 10 years old swarming the area. One kid was standing still, though in the way of where my cart should have gone. That one child seemed to be the only one realizing how crazy things were getting and was embarrassed or mentally shutting down. I also understand the woman was overwhelmed, which probably caused her meltdown. I'm not sure if they were all her kids or not, but she was already screaming and cursing at them as they were running away from the self-checkout area and running by the employee-manned registers. I was minding my own business, ignoring it. As long as they didn't mess with me, it was fine. I scanned a box and it came up as an unknown item. 2 employees started to head my way. I thought possibly one was training the other, which would explain 2 of them. What I didn't know is that Karen had called them over as well. She wanted them to take ice cream off her receipt, saying that she didn't have any ice cream. The employee pointed at her grocery bag and said, "Isn't that the ice cream? You can clearly see it through the bag. How dare you look through my bags? That's invading my privacy. Take the mother-ducking ice cream off. I'm not paying for that. What's your name?" Employee provides name. "Oh, you know I'm calling corporate on your ass." The guy that helped me already fixed the scanning issue, but he was still standing there, confused. I think he was trying to figure out if he should jump in or if he should stay quiet. Maybe he was preparing for a fist fight. The employee was trying to explain, but there was more screaming and cussing. Then the Karen was out of there pretty quickly, so I'm not sure if she already paid before wanting the ice cream taken off. They took the ice cream off, took the loss, and then she paid. She just took off without paying. I was still there for another few minutes as I scanned the rest of my items and paid. The employees started to gather to see if the employee that was yelled at was doing okay. One employee showed up and said they saw it on the cameras and rushed over thinking there was going to be a fight. They comforted her by saying they'd back her up if Karen does call to complain. I also heard one say that the Karen was already an issue before she got to the checkout, but I didn't hear why. As I was leaving, Karen was stuck in the entryway as her kids were trying to fish quarters out of the sticker machines. I had a ton of trouble navigating around them as she was in the doorway, screaming at them to move. The last thing I heard was, "I am not taking you to the ducking amusement park." Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.